Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Red Pill Garage. Does your car need a new timing belt, bearings and seals? Does your car have a noisy timing belt bearing? What about checking if your timing belt is due? Do you want to know how to replace your timing belt? You can fix it yourself easily, and let me teach you how to replace your timing belt, seals and bearings. Now you're probably wondering, when am I supposed to change my timing belt? Now, most cars, your timing belt gets replaced every 100,000 kilometres or 5 years. Some cars are at 60,000 kilometres and some cars at 150,000 kilometres, but always check your owner's manual to confirm this. And in the event of a timing belt failure, it is probable that the valve to piston damage has occurred. A compression test should be carried out on all cylinders before removing the cylinder head. And believe me, that's going to cost you a small fortune. So you want to make sure your timing belt gets replaced on time. Now, most Japanese cars and Korean cars, timing belt replacement procedures are very similar. Now, this video will act as a really good guide to replace the timing belt on your car. Now, there's a couple of different variants you can purchase when replacing the timing belt. You can replace the timing belt on its own, or you can replace it with the belt, the seals and the bearings. Or you can buy the full kit like I've done here. With this particular car, we can also buy the water pump. Now, I'll be replacing the water pump on this car, but I'll be making a separate video for that, so stay tuned for that video. And that's our Dayco timing belt water pump kit. And that's the part number there. For this particular car, it's a Hyundai Getz. And that's our timing belt. That's the outer side of the timing belt, made by Dayco. And that's the inside of the timing belt. And that's our timing belt tensioner bearing and the tensioner spring that goes with the bearing. That's the idler bearing for the timing belt. Our camshaft seals, we only be using one because there's only one on this car. That's our crankshaft seal. Our pre-assembly grease. Our water pump, the bolt, water pump gasket, and I like to use some gasket glue. And this particular brand that I use is made by Durco. It's a really good quality gasket glue. Okay, these are the tools I'll be using today. And this is my seal removal and fitment toolkit. Has different size sleeves there for different type of applications like camshaft and crankshaft seals. It's a nice safe way not to cause any damage to the camshaft or to the crankshaft surface. And the Loctite 263 thread locker, torch, WD-40, multi-function cleaner to clean up the surface of where the camshaft seal and crankshaft seals sit, a pry bar, universal sprocket holding tool, 1/2-inch breaker bar and 1/2-inch ratchet, an extension bar, 1/2-inch torque wrench, a 3/8 drive air ratchet, 1/4-inch drive air ratchet, 3/8 drive extension bars, a breaker bar, a 3/8 drive ratchet, 3/8 drive torque wrench, and up the back there we've got a 3/8 drive swivel, a 14mm 3/8 drive socket, a 12mm, a 10, and in the background there we've got an 8mm and a 10mm 1/4-inch socket, and the 8mm socket I'll be using on the seal removal and fitment toolkit. And there we have our 22mm sockets. There's two of them there, one's an impact, and we have a 17mm impact socket there as well. Then a 1/4-inch ratchet, 1/4-inch extension bar, 12-14 ring spanner, a 10mm ring spanner. Then we've got a 12mm ratchet spanner, 10mm combination spanner, a 17 combination spanner, some emery cloth, just fine emery cloth. Don't use sandpaper, sandpaper's too abrasive. Impact gun, multi-grips, a telescopic mirror, a couple of flat blade screwdrivers, and a whiteout. And don't forget your safety glasses. Okay, next what you want to do is to raise the car so you can remove the right hand front wheel, and just make sure you're using good quality jack stands. And once you remove the wheel, place the wheel under the car so if anything was to go wrong and the car was to fall, it would land on the wheel, not on yourself. Next, remove the right hand side cover, then temporarily loosen the water pump pulley bolts. Then later on I'm going to show you guys a nice easy way to remove those bolts out nice and easy, because it is a tight squeeze to get your hand in there. Okay, with a 14mm ring spanner, loosen off the tensioner pulley bolt, because now we want to remove that belt. That's the adjuster. And with the 12mm ring spanner, we want to loosen off the alternator pivoting nut at the bottom of the alternator. Then remove the engine dipstick so we can get to the adjuster on the alternator to drop the alternator belt, then finally remove the air conditioning belt. And that's the adjuster there for the alternator. And now we can remove that alternator belt. Once you've removed each of the belts, you want to inspect them for any cracks or damage. And there's the air conditioning belt. And that's absolutely cactus, that belt. You can see the big cracks in that. Definitely got to replace that belt for sure. Okay, next with the whiteout, you want to mark your belts. And that one there I've labelled AC for air conditioning, even though we're going to replace that belt. And the next one's the alternator, because when you purchase the new belts, on the box it will give you a part number but doesn't tell you what application it's for, so that's why I like to still mark them that way so I can compare them. Next, crack loose the power steering pivoting bolt at the bottom of the power steering pump, and the next bolt there that we're going to get to, we have to go through the power steering pulley. You don't want to go through the top there with an open end spanner because you'll probably round it off because they're super tight. We're going to go straight through there. And this is one of the reasons why we take off the power steering belt last, because if the other two belts were on there, we wouldn't be able to turn it so easy by hand. We have that luxury now of moving that pulley in any direction we want. Now it's just a matter of pushing that pump back and taking the belt off. And again the same thing, inspect the belt, and you can see that's cactus as well, that's full of cracks, so we're going to replace that belt also. Remember earlier when I said I was going to show you guys an easy way to get those water pump pulley bolts off? With the 10mm ring spanner, turn it clockwise, not anti-clockwise but clockwise, and those bolts will come out super fast and you won't even drop a single one. Nice and easy. Once the inner and outer water pump pulleys have been removed, I'll be removing the timing belt upper cover, and there's 4 bolts that hold this particular cover in place. Once the timing belt upper cover has been removed, the next thing you want to look for is a timing mark on the camshaft sprocket, which is that round hole. It's got to line up with that timing mark on the cylinder head cover, which is that red cutout just there. And to achieve that, I'm going to get the 22mm socket, extension bar and 1/2" ratchet. I'm going to place that onto the crankshaft pulley bolt and turn the motor clockwise. only clockwise, and don't turn it from the camshaft bolt. It's got to be from the crankshaft bolt, otherwise the pulley may jump teeth on the belt and the alignment will be out of whack. You can now see the timing mark on the cylinder head, which is that red mark, is perfectly lined up in the middle of that hole in the camshaft sprocket, and that's what you want to try to achieve. I'll try and show you a different angle so you can get a better view on it. And that's it there. The reason why I've got to use the telescopic mirror is that high pressure power steering hose is in the way, so you really need to use that mirror. And that's the hole there. Okay, next with the impact gun, I'm going to remove the crankshaft pulley bolt. That's it there. And then next what you want to do is place one hand in the 3 o'clock position and your other hand at the 9 o'clock position, and just pull that pulley back and it should just slip straight off. There's no need for any specialised pullers. Then next, you want to remove the crankshaft flange plate there, and that's just a little guide plate that helps to keep the timing belt in alignment. And then you want to remove the timing belt lower cover. Okay, now that all the covers are off, I'll just quickly show you guys what it looks like back there. Now you're probably thinking, what a dog's breakfast? But don't let a job like this intimidate you. If you follow these step-by-step instructions, you should be right, you won't have any problems. Also, what you'll probably notice that your timing marks are slightly out, like you can see there. It's a couple of millimeters out of whack. Now the reason for this is when using the impact gun on the crankshaft pulley bolt, it actually turns the motor anti-clockwise from the force of using the gun. So you'll have to straighten that back up, and also double check that all your marks are lined up when we go to put the new belt on. And to realign those timing marks back up again, simply just grab your multi-grips onto the crankshaft and just turn it until those timing marks are lined up again. Okay, next I'll be removing the timing belt tensioner and spring. Okay, there's our timing belt tensioner bearing and spring. And now I'll be removing the timing belt. And there you have it, one timing belt. And now I'll be removing the timing belt sprocket. And just make sure you don't drop that sprocket. It's really important you hang on to that pretty tight. Okay, next I'll be removing the timing belt idler bearing. Okay, next I'm going to remove the camshaft sprocket, and I'll be using the universal sprocket holding tool and the 17mm socket with the breaker bar. And make sure you don't drop that sprocket, because any damage done to the teeth on that sprocket will transfer to the belt, causing the belt to prematurely wear out or possibly even snap, and then you can kiss your engine goodbye. And there's our timing mark on the cylinder head. I'll just quickly show you guys how this seal puller works. Using one of these legs here, you basically squeeze it in between the camshaft or the crankshaft, whichever case you're using it on, and slip it behind the seal itself. And you want to put one in opposite positions, and basically wind the puller in. As it winds in, the seal will pop out. It's that simple. You can see now as I'm winding it in how the seal's being pulled out. Okay, with the multifunction cleaner you want to give it a few squirts, and then with the emery cloth you want to start cleaning up all that crud that's there. And just take your time doing it, because you want to really give it a thorough clean. Okay, next it's time to grease up our camshaft seal with some pre-assembly grease. Now just make sure when you're greasing up the inside of that seal, you only apply that pre-assembly grease on the inside, never put it on the outside of that seal, because you don't want that seal blowing back out. And that's all it needs. Okay, once you've done that, next what you want to do is push the seal on by hand, and you want to push it in nice and evenly and make sure it doesn't kink to one side. As far as you can get it in by hand. Okay, with our spare camshaft seal that we have, now it's time to find what sleeve will fit that seal, so we can push that in. Now what you want to do is find the right diameter sleeve that sits on the outside of that seal. Now you don't want to go for the middle of that seal or the inside of that seal, because as you're pushing it in, the seal will kink and cave in and you'll have a major oil leak on your hands. Then it's just a matter of finding the correct adapters to go on there. It should be something like that. If not, you choose the correct one once again. And now it's just a matter of screwing that bolt in, and as it's being wound in, you want to just make sure nothing kinks to one side and everything's sitting nice and straight and true. And that's the end result. Okay, now I'm going to refit the camshaft sprocket. And next I'm going to apply a little bit of thread locker to the camshaft bolt. You only need about 3 or 4 drops if you're going to use the high strength thread locker. And next you want to set your torque wrench to 98 Newton meters. And using our universal sprocket holding tool, you want to hold down that camshaft sprocket while you're tightening that camshaft bolt up. It doesn't matter if you move that camshaft a little bit, because we're going to reline it up. And that's it. Okay, next I'm going to apply some thread locker to the timing belt idler pulley bolt. Then I'll be setting the torque wrench to 54 Newton meters. And that's it, she's done. Now I previously fitted a new crankshaft seal off camera. I'm sure you guys get the drift on how this works now. Okay, once the crankshaft sprocket's on, I'll be installing the timing belt tensioner, but don't fully tighten the bolts just yet. Because what we need to do first before we fit this belt, we need to make sure our camshaft sprocket and our crankshaft sprocket timing marks are all lined up and dead center. So what that means, number 1 cylinder is at top dead center compression. So once we have all our timing marks lined up, what we need to do next is to force the tensioner pulley back by using a flat blade screwdriver to push the tensioner upwards, then lock the 12mm bolt down, and then we can install the timing belt. First you want to place the timing belt on the crankshaft sprocket first, then the idler pulley, the camshaft sprocket, and the timing belt tensioner. So in other words, you're going in an anti-clockwise direction. And make sure there's no belt slack between the pulleys. Okay, now I'm going to loosen off the tensioner bolt, and you'll see the tensioner spring forward, so it's going to apply the correct tension to the timing belt. And there you have it. And next I'll be applying 26 Newton meters of torque to both of the tensioner bolts. Okay, once all that's done, I'm going to rotate the crankshaft 2 full revolutions clockwise, and then realign the crankshaft and camshaft sprockets timing marks. And once we've confirmed that our crankshaft and camshaft timing marks are absolutely spot on, this virtually ensures us there'll be no valve to piston damage when we go to start the engine up. So our engine timing will be absolutely perfect. Okay, once I've installed the lower timing belt cover, I can then install the flange plate and then tighten up the lower cover bolts. And then install the timing belt upper cover and tighten all the upper cover bolts. Next, install the crankshaft pulley and then apply thread locker to the crankshaft pulley bolt. And next, with our universal sprocket holding tool and our 1/2 inch torque wrench, I'm going to apply 147 Newton meters of torque to that crankshaft pulley bolt. Okay, next I'll be fitting the inner and outer water pump pulleys. Remember the trick I showed you earlier, the easy way to get the bolts out? Well, it's the same process to get them in. Nice and easy. It's just a really tight fitting that's really hard to get your hand down there. And now I'm going to fit the power steering belt. You want to place that on the water pump pulley first and then onto the power steering pump pulley. It's much easier doing it that way. And then the air conditioning belt. And finally the alternator belt. And don't forget to tighten up your water pump pulley bolts. And don't go over tightening them because you don't want to break them off. And then you can tighten up the alternator pivoting nut. And the power steering belt. Now when applying tension to your power steering belt and you're using a pry bar, make sure you're not prying it up against a plastic surface such as a timing belt cover, because you'll definitely crack it or break it. Make sure it's up against a metal surface. And once you're happy with the tension of the power steering belt, then you can tighten up the power steering pivoting bolt. The engine dipstick, and then you can fully tighten up the alternator adjuster locking bolt. Next, refit the right hand side cover. Okay, next I'm going to lube up the wheel studs with a bit of WD-40, and when spraying WD-40 onto the wheel studs, you can either spray it in a downward motion or parallel to the disc. This way you'll minimise any overspray on the disc surface. Okay, next I'm going to fit the wheel and then the wheel nuts. Now when tightening your wheel nuts up, go in the crisscross action, don't go in the circular action. Now on this particular car, a Hyundai Getz, I'll be torquing up the wheel nuts to 110 Newton meters. Now when you tighten up your wheel nuts, never have the full weight of the car down on the ground, just have the tyre just touching the ground. And once all the wheel nuts are torqued up, you can drop the rest of the weight of the car down. And there you have it guys, that's how you change a timing belt, seals and bearings properly on an engine. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button not to miss out on any future videos. And I'll see you in the next episode of Red Pill Garage. Thank you for watching.